Welcome everyone. Now that we've got our observation skills underway and we're honing that ability to see all the different problems and resources around in our design area, we're going to need to put those onto a map. So this video is about how we can get a base map of the property or backyard that we're working with. With a balcony, we're going to be simply doing hand measurements and using that to create our base map. So one of my favorite tools that I always use is Google Earth Pro. I really like this tool because it is free. First of all, you can download it so that you have access offline. You don't need to have an internet connection to do your design work. And it gives you the ability to print out a really good quality base map that has satellite imagery on it if you wish. So we're going to look at this program, and it's important to not use the online version of this program because it doesn't have the feature that we are looking for and that we will be highlighting in this video. So when you have downloaded Google Earth and you have installed the actual program, you will enter into it seeing the Earth in front of you. So the first thing to get the hang of is the controls that we have here. So you have a hand that's going to allow you to roll around on the Earth. But as you do so, if you notice in the top right corner here, we have that north indicator that is moving around. So when we're making our maps, we want to ensure that we always have that set to the top. This will allow us to orient ourselves, and it's a convention in map making to have north set to the top, and if that's not the case, for some reason we'll have a north arrow that will indicate otherwise. The other buttons that we have here are the pan, so we're panning across the map with these images or these arrows here, so we'll look at that when we're closer up. And we also have tilt, which is going to change the angle of the camera, and this can actually get to be a problem sometimes when we are attempting to get a good quality map. And then you have your zoom, which is going to give you a zoom in and a zoom out function. Now on the left we have our search bar. We have different indications here that are projects. These are actually the projects that I'm currently working on. So you can actually see we have the My Places and the current projects that you have saved or created. There's other layers down here that you can turn on or turn off, like roads, 3D buildings, and so on and so forth. These will not be covering in this video. So the first thing you want to do is you want to type in the address that we are looking to work with today, whether it's your backyard, your property, or a client or a friend. So we're going to type that in, and as you see, Google Earth will bring us to that location. And then as we get close to that location, so we're working with this little park here at this address, but what we do is when you start to zoom in, we get this tilt function, and that's to obviously show off all the 3D buildings and the 3D trees and so on and so forth, which are nice to look at, but in terms of designing, this isn't going to give me a good view to do any kind of measurements or create a base map. So the first thing you want to change once you have Google Earth installed and running is to go up to the tools on the menu bar here. We're going to go down to options, and in that we're going to select navigate. So there's 3D cache touring. We're going to go into the navigation tab, and we're going to change the navigation option from automatically tilt when zooming to do not tilt automatically when zooming. And we're going to apply those changes and go back. So now we're not going to change the tilt based on how we zoom in or zoom out, which you can do with the middle mouse wheel on your mouse if you have a mouse, or you can use on a trackpad, just the 2-finger scroll. What we're looking at here is the angle. So we're going to look at changing the tilt view. So we want to tilt that view back to a perfect overhead aerial view. All right, so we're just going to wait for that to catch up. And now we're going to be able to actually go to our location. And so now that we have this setting, we're not going to lose that perspective when we zoom in. So you can zoom in, as far as your map detail allows you, to give you, a better perspective on that property. So once that's set, now we're going to look at how to generate a base map. So when generating a base map, we want to line up the aerial view of what you're working with, and we're going to zoom in so that we can get as much of this image in our view as possible. And then we're going to go over to File and select Print. Now this is going to give you a printable version, or you can save it as a PDF, as you can see here in the menu bar. But it gives you automatically a title, it gives you a legend, and the legend is consisting of all the points that we have currently added to this map. And so if we go over here you can see that we have these points that are added. We can add all kinds of different other points on the map as well, but we won't be looking at that in this video. So what we're going to look at is, well, the map is lined up. The benefit of using this is not so much for the title bar and the legend. I don't actually use that. I prefer to have my own title bar and legend that is modifiable and editable separate from the base map. So what I'll do is I will actually get out of this, and I will change the orientation of my map so that it fits better on the printout that we're going to be doing. And I will line it up so that way we can zoom in and get the biggest possible map without having any of the map in that title bar area, because I'm going to clip that off whenever I go there. So again, we go back to print, and now we have the map set up for us here. And the two features that I really like with this map view is that it automatically gives us a scale bar over here. So that means that we have a reference for measurement on this map, which is really useful when you're trying to decide to place trees, garden beds, so on and so forth on the map. The other is the north arrow. You can see, remember we changed the angle of the map to better fit the printout. Well, now the north arrow is marking north for us. So those are both two very important features that we're going to be using when we have a map. So once you've got it lined up and set to your preference, then you can actually just go, let's zoom that in a little bit more. So we can then go to Save PF and save that however you want on your computer. So that's how you get your base map from Google Earth Pro. I personally, when doing this, prefer to have multiple different perspectives. So I'll have one perspective that is maybe the entire area of the park or the backyard that we're working with. The next one will go in and focus on specific areas. So here we have the community garden and food forest potential area that we're going to be looking at. So this is something that I'd like to have a zoom in on. And don't worry about the 3D functions and all of that, because I actually won't be using this image. We'll be making an overlay that simply has these measurements and locations of specific things. So we're going to use this only to help us get a rough location and distance of all the different elements that are on the map, instead of having to go to the property and measure everything by hand. So that's how you get your base map set up, and that's a great way to get started using Google Earth as a simple tool. There's obviously tons of different tools out there. If you know any really good open source or free tools, be sure to post them in the comments and we can share them with the group. But this is one that I revert back to very often for its simplicity of use and its easy learning curve. The next thing I want to show you in Google Earth Pro, now that we have our base map, is actually how to use it to generate some specific items. So there's a few different features here that I really enjoy. One of them up here on the toolbar is the ruler. Now this is usable to measure. So we click once to begin the measurement, and we click again to give us a rough measure of that distance. And you can see here we can set it to meters or feet or kilometers or whatever else you're looking for. And we can see that the rough length of this community garden bed here is 14 meters long. Now we can also, change that measurement up and look at the width. So we're looking at about 7 meters by 14 meters. We can even decide to verify, how far is the center of this tree from the edge of this bed. These are different ways that we can be measuring to understand the distances of our property. Now, if you've been on site, you can get a measurement, a few key measurements. So I would say, measuring from the sidewalk to the edge of this garden is a good one to get started. And measuring from this sidewalk to the edge of the garden perpendicular is also another way to get started. And then those references, you'll see maybe this was 11 meters in real life, and this measurement is showing us 11.5. So you can see it's not absolutely accurate, but it is giving us a good idea to get started. So that's one of the features, is the ability to measure. So you can just clear that when you're done. It gives you that ability to measure. Now the next one is to actually draw on the property, and I use this very early on, just when trying to suggest certain things to clients. So we can draw here and identify this as the as the garden area. Now we're having some issues with the edges of this because we're actually in a 3D view, and so we have to, in options and navigation, disable the 3D view if we don't want it to try and map and design with 3D. The other way that we can actually change that is by looking at the pop-up window that comes when you create a new polygon or a new line. We're going to go to altitude, and instead of having this clamped to the ground, you can have it say relative to the ground and actually go at a certain height. And so you can say, you know, it's going to be 1 meter above the ground. Now that will prevent it from interfering with the three-dimensional layers that we have. So that's a quick fix for getting rid of the 3D. If you actually want to remove the 3D, well, then you have to find the specific option for that and remove the 3D visibility. You can go in the layers over here, so you can select the down arrow and, you know, remove the 3D elements here. Now we've got our two-dimensional images that have been taken from the satellite, and as you see, when we go back and replace these elements here, they're no longer interfering, and we can reset that if you want. So to get back your properties, you're going to have to just go select properties once you right click on the item and select properties, and then we go back to altitude, and if we clamp that to 0, it should say clamped to the ground, and so clamped to the ground is going to show us that we have that directly on the ground level. Now if you notice, I messed up this corner here. It was not actually placed accurately, so I'm going to go and select that point and readjust it. Again, this just gives me a rough idea of the actual garden, and if you are doing a simple kind of concept plan or ideas map of what you can do, this can be a quick way to have different options proposed to the client or the person that you're working with. So you can have select path and say that we're going to create a new walking path that goes through the property, and so that's going to be there. You can also, when you're explaining it, you can share this Google Earth file with them so that they can upload it, and you can actually describe and say, you know, there's the different options of the paths and the different options of the garden beds, and remove those and add those as you wish. I personally prefer taking a base map and then working in a different program, because the issue with this one is that if I wanted to make a dozen of these, then it's not as easy. So we can, you can copy this, but you can't actually paste that element down. Or when you paste it, if you notice, I just pasted it there, it doesn't allow me to paste it in a new location. So what you end up with is you end up with a duplicate item that's over top of the other item. So it's not so good for creating, if we were to create a tree polygon, if we were to create a polygon for a tree and then we want to copy and paste that, well, that's not going to give us something that we can copy and paste and use across the map. So it does have limitations, but I find it to be most useful when we are actually just creating a base map, not using it for drawing our new design elements or placing things, but mostly just for getting a measure and getting a base map that we can then use in our other program to begin designing ideas and placing our new elements on the map. Alright, so one of the limitations that we have with the Google Earth application is that because you're looking at from an aerial view, you are going to see what's highest in altitude, and what we're seeing in this property is mostly trees. So if we were actually going to be designing here, there's a garage down here, there's a swimming pool, there's maybe other elements under there that I need to know their relative spacing so that I can actually use them in good proper placement and design around them when working with my design. So the Google Earth doesn't allow us to have a good perspective for that, and there's no way of removing those trees as the image has been taken aerially. So we're going to actually switch now from Google Earth and go to Google Maps. And so in Google Maps, we're going to zoom back out. So this is the park that we were at, and this is the property that I was just looking at here. Now, in order to get the information, we're going to go and change the map view. So down here, remember we've switched to Google Maps. So Google Maps, we've added the address that we're looking for, and then down here you'll have a map view. And so you can change that view from satellite to a map view that just shows you the buildings and the roads. And so you can see all of a sudden now we have the buildings that are outlined in gray. And so depending on the actual coloring and contrast here, you can see that we can measure these building footprints. And again, they're trying to show them to us in a 3D view, so that's maybe not the best in some cases depending on certain buildings. So one thing you need to take into consideration is that here you can see this shed and this swimming pool were actually not shown on that map. So it's not a perfect map, it's showing the main buildings, but it does still at least give you the positioning of those buildings. So it could be a good way to get some base measurements and understand. If your property is completely covered in trees, then you've got to just go on the ground and do some base measurements to figure out where those trees are relative to the elements that you are designing. I find this to be only really a big problem when you're working with a small yard. Bigger properties, you tend to have a lot more room to work with. So that's how you can use Google Maps to help you get an idea. Now we don't have the print option on Google Maps, so we don't have that ability to get the print preview and pull up the scale bar. So what you'll see down here in the bottom left, there is a tiny little scale bar, and if we look, the maps are always oriented north. So you know where north is, but we can't rotate this to get a best screenshot and be able to use that. And also I can't select to remove the titles and remove the streets and so on and so forth. So it's useful, but it's nowhere near as powerful as Google Earth Pro for creating a base map.